Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this video, we need to talk about 4 September baits that you need to be throwing because things are changing. You know, September is a transition month. You know, a lot of people think of the fall transition really happening in October, but for much of the country, you know, here in Tennessee for sure, and a lot of areas, it's already started in September. And really when we're talking about the fall transition, we're really talking about the fall migration of bait fish from the main lake areas to the backs of the creeks. And that's one thing that's starting to happen in September. And I'm not saying that all the fish just magically just disappear from the main lake and get into the backs of the creeks. That's not the case. But there is a switch happening, there is a change happening, and that can allow you to start catching a lot more fish, a more aggressive fish, as they start transitioning into the backs of the creeks. And there's also some other things going on, you know, on lakes that have vegetation. This is one of the prime times to fish that thick, matted out vegetation. You know, you look at lakes like Gunnersville, or, you know, Nickajack is a local one that's lesser known, but it's got perfect vegetation mats. Any lake that has grass that grows up to the surface, usually September is a prime month because it's the month where it has already grown up to the surface, it's gotten as thick as it's going to get, and the root systems start dying off because they're not getting the sunlight penetration anymore. And so you start getting these wonderful, you know, nice tunnels for those bass to go explore under that grass and utilize those grass mats, as opposed to like July and parts of August, where it's so thick that, you know, it's hard for the fish to navigate. It may not be hard for the fish to navigate, but it's hard to be able to fish effectively and efficiently and get those fish to bite, number one, and get them in the boat, you know, ultimately. So the 4 baits that I want to show you today for September really are focused on the backs of the creeks. So when you start seeing those shad moving into the backs of those creeks, having, you know, in the middle of that migration, and also for fishing grass. Those are the 2 scenarios that I really focus on heavily, and that pretty much covers all the different types of lakes that you could fish. You know, if it's a lake that doesn't have a lot of vegetation or no vegetation at all, you can go into the backs of the creeks and be pretty successful with 2 of these techniques. And then if you're in a lake that you're fortunate enough to have a lot of grass, you can use the other 2 techniques. You could actually use all of those techniques for those types of lakes. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with the shad migration, baits first. Really, there are 2, and they're very similar techniques. The first one is going to be a chatterbait. So chatterbait, very, very important tool during the fall. You can fish vegetation, or you can fish it open water. I'm all tangled in another rod here. You can fish open water, or you could fish around docks, or around laydowns and things like that. Chatterbait definitely isn't the best around laydowns, but it can work very, very well. I was fishing a chatterbait as my primary technique on Watts Bar a couple years ago during the Bassmaster Open there, in the backs of the creeks, you know, focusing on the shad migration. And it was like the 1st or 2nd week of September, and absolutely crushing them, having a blast catching them on a chatterbait. And I was throwing it into laydowns and just kind of weaving it in and out of those branches. And you can, you know, work a chatterbait through wood. It's going to snag more than, say, a swim jig, which is the next bait we want to talk about. But you can definitely do it, and it gets a lot of great strikes from it. But usually with a chatterbait, what I'm looking for is, I'm going in the backs of these creeks, I'm looking for isolated wood, isolated vegetation, anything that's just, you know, out there on these flats in the backs of those creeks where those drainages are coming in. That's what I'm going to be doing, is throwing the chatterbait, but also on just straight flats. Even if there's not an object that you can visually see to cast to, just fishing flats and looking for those schools of shad. Chatterbait is a great search tool for flat type situations where you're just fan casting. So chatterbait is one of the top baits that I'm going to be using this time of year. Usually I'm using like a 7.3 medium heavy Versus Series rod, 20-pound test, fluorocarbon, maybe red label. And you know, the type of chatterbait is usually going to be a shad color. So if it's real dirty, maybe like a dirty white color. If it's starting to get a little bit clearer, maybe it's clear water shad color. And you know, the green pumpkin shad actually works really good in a lot of different situations. So yeah, but just keep it shad patterns. That's what you're focusing on. Now, if I'm fishing more wood than anything else, I'm just fishing real thick bushes, laydowns, and those sort of things, swim jig is really what comes into play more than the chatterbait, because it's so much more efficient at coming through cover than the chatterbait, or wood cover than the chatterbait. This one needs to be trimmed. I've got a goat on the back here. Another trailer I like is the Diesel Minnows, the 4-inch version. And you know, both of those work really well on the back of a swim jig. This one right here is the Z-Man Snakehead swim jig. I also like a core tackle swim jig a lot. This one's a really unique, you know, swim jig. Works really, really well. Love that thing. And so yeah, just fishing a swim jig around that wood cover that you find is really, really good. I prefer the chatterbait around vegetation, but the swim jig is definitely better when you start getting around wood. And laydowns are very common in creeks that the shad are migrating into the backs of. So fishing laydowns is a great way to catch those fish that are ambushing those shad schools as they move into the backs of the creeks. It's something that the bass really utilize quite a bit this time of year. So yeah, swim jigs are definitely on the short list for September. All right, so let's get into the more vegetation minded techniques. And really there's two different techniques that I really like to focus on when the grass is really, really thick. You know, I bring back up Gunnersville. Gunnersville is a perfect example of a lake that just is so much fun to fish in September. I mean, it's fun to fish the rest of the year too, but the grass fishing is such just perfect habitat for them. Really there's two different techniques that I like to use. The first one is going in after them with a heavy weight and a punch-in setup. So this right here is a really good creature bait that I like to use for punch-in. This is the Z-Man Gremlin. I trim it down, I take off those little curl tails, but it's a great little punch-in bait. You want heavy braided line, 65-pound test. You want a heavy-duty hook. I use the WRM 959 from Hayabusa. Everything that we're talking about, by the way, is going to be in the description below. So all those links are going to be below. And then, you know, a punching weight. You know, anything from an ounce on up. You know, you're just punching through those dense grass mats. And so this is going to be something that you're definitely going to want to do. Whenever you have a really thick grass mat and a really nice edge to it, punching can be one of the best ways to catch those fish and catch big fish too. So yeah, that's definitely something you're going to be doing in September for sure. That's actually... Flipping is probably the best, or punching thick grass is probably the best way on grass lakes to catch them this time of year, if they don't want to come through the mat, which is what we're going to talk about next. So use a real heavy rod. This is a 7/8 heavy Titan HD series rod from Fitzgerald. Really very high performance punching rod. But yeah, punching is going to be huge in September. That is definitely a big one. All right, so finally we get to a very exciting bite. If it is turning on, which generally September is the month that it really starts turning on. You know, fishing a frog, but not just any frog, a frog that is well suited for fishing over heavy grass mats. is definitely going to be a favorite this time of year. Again, the big thing that's happening right now is that thick grass mat that started to pop up and form, you know, in July and August is now so thick that the light penetration is not getting through to the roots, so to the deeper parts of the vegetation, so it's starting to break down. And so you still have that huge thick you know, matted roof over their heads, but there's a lot more room for those fish, including like the forage species like bluegill, to roam around underneath the grass mats. So a frog is really, really well suited for this scenario where you have those tunnel systems forming, but you have that good thick canopy. And so throwing a frog, going to be a big time deal in September. I like to use heavier rod than just like walking a frog. I use a 7.6 heavy action. This is the Okeechobee Rod. I'm just hitting the garage door. The 7.6 Okeechobee rod, or you know, any flipping stick, is going to be very well suited for this. You're not like walking this bait much. You're essentially just pulling it over that thick grass mat to get the strikes. So a little bit different than what you would use it for, you know, skipping it underneath overhangs and stuff like that. So don't use the same tackle. You're going to want to use 65-pound braid. I use the Seaguar Tactics. That's my favorite. Has a good texture to it that cuts through that grass if you catch them on a long cast. And as far as the frog that I like to use, you know, there's a lot of good frogs on the market for walking, but there's not not all frogs are really well suited for throwing over dense grass mats. So this one right here is the Berkeley Swamp Lord. I really like this one, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's pretty heavy, so I can lob it, and it also compresses the mat pretty good. Number two, the hook is just insane. Those two hooks are so thick. You can really wrench big fish out of heavy cover with those, and it just has a wider bottom to it. Again, I want to displace the mat as much as possible, so it like depresses a little bit and allows that fish to track it better. If it's a light frog, and I'll even put some weight in a frog if it's a really, really thick mat. I want it to sink down into that mat a little bit and create a trench. But having a good wide body frog, I think, is really important. The Swamp Lord's really good. Snag Proof makes a good one because Bobby Barrack is you know, arguably the best matted grass frog angler of all time, from like the California Delta. He's helped Snag Proof design a bunch. But yeah, I'll put those links in the description below for those. But you can use any frog, but you're not going to be as successful with just any frog for matted grass fishing. Just like, you know, if you have your preferences as far as like, you know, which frogs walk better in open water. So the same thing happens with matted grass, you know, and the right type of frogs, the qualities that you want from a frog. So anyways, guys, those are my 4 favorite techniques for the month of September. Every lake is going to be a little bit different, but between, you know, these 4 different presentations, you can really find a spot on your lake where these are going to excel. I'm pretty positive about that. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have another technique that you would never be seen without in the month of September. I want to know about it. And other than that, I'm going to see you guys out on the water. Make sure you trust the process.